Professor Claxon stared at the class, his tentacles twitching. Today we examine why humans keep predators as pets. He showed footage of a cat playing with a mouse, then killing it. This creature murders billions yearly for sport, yet humans call it fluffy. The alien students shifted uneasily. What kind of species treats killers like family? You know, when you see a creature that murders for fun, you don't exactly invite it onto your lap. Professor Claxon let that sink in as the footage continued playing. That fluffy thing that just purred and rubbed against a human's leg now had a mouse in its mouth, shaking it methodically until it went still. The disconnect was immediate, visceral. He zoomed in on the retractable claws extending and retracting, the pupils dilating from soft circles to vertical slits in seconds. One moment it's kneading a blanket with soft paws, the next it's deploying biological weapons with surgical precision. The transition was so seamless it made several students flinch in their seats. These animals aren't just hunting for food, Claxon pointed out. They kill billions of smaller creatures annually, often leaving them as offerings rather than consuming them. It's practice, really. Target practice for a predator that doesn't need the calories but maintains the skills anyway. The humans don't just tolerate this behavior. They actively celebrate it. Claxon showed clips of people laughing as their cats dropped dead rodents on doorsteps, cooing over these gifts as if receiving a bouquet rather than a corpse. They film these moments, share them with friends, post them on their communication networks. It's like keeping a miniature assassin as a roommate and praising its efficiency. The class began to murmur, tentacles twitching and scales shifting colors in discomfort. This wasn't about domestication in the usual sense. It was something else entirely. Something that defied standard interspecies relationship models. What kind of species rewards a killer for doing its job too well? A student in the back raised a tentacle but didn't speak, just let the question hang there unanswered. The footage shifted to show humans sleeping with these predators curled against their throats. The most vulnerable part of any species. Complete trust placed in something with instinctive murder equipment. The resolution came not from Claxon, but from the images themselves. Cats sleeping in baby cribs playing with children, being dressed in ridiculous costumes by their owners. The paradox wasn't just accepted by humans, it was embraced. They saw no contradiction between cuddly companion and efficient killing machine. Which brings us to an even more unsettling example. So you think a cat is bad? Let's talk about the creature humans let guard their children. Professor Claxon switched the display to show the domestic dog, that happy creature that wags its tail and pants with what looks like simple joy. He rewound the evolutionary clock a few thousand years, pulling up the stark anatomical comparison between the modern pet and its direct ancestor. The gray wolf, a pack hunter that could bring down prey 3 times its size through coordinated effort and pure endurance. Their jaws can exert enough pressure to snap bone. Their ancestors chased animals across frozen tundras until the prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. These aren't just physical attributes. They're the result of millions of years of predatory specialization. And humans saw this creature, this efficient group hunter, and decided it belonged in their nurseries. They didn't just tame it. They brought it into the most vulnerable spaces imaginable. Claxon showed footage of dogs sleeping in children's beds, their heads resting on pillows next to small, trusting faces. Humans share their food with these animals, hand-feeding them from their own plates. They give them names, celebrate their birthdays, treat them like furry children who just happen to have teeth that can puncture through steel. It's like having a personal security detail that also licks your face. The loyalty conditioning is absolute. A reprogramming of natural instincts that turns a potential threat into a devoted guardian. Watch, Claxon said, as the footage showed a dog positioning itself between a human child and a stranger, its body language shifting from relaxed to alert in half a second. The tail stops wagging. The eyes fixate. The evolutionary programming is still there, just redirected. This isn't just companionship. It's the implicit militarization of the domestic space. Humans have weaponized their homes with living security systems that still think they're part of the family. The resolution became clear as the professor showed more examples. Dogs herding children away from streets, standing guard over sleeping infants, responding to commands with military precision during training exercises. They've taken wolves and turned them into family members, who also happen to be a living defense system. The transformation is so complete that humans now breed different varieties for different protective functions. Some for intimidation, some for tracking, some for pure physical deterrence. all descended from the same predator that once hunted at the edges of human settlements, now sleeping at the foot of the bed. But the list of dangerous roommates is just getting started. I mean, if you're going to have a pet, why not choose one that can kill you with a single bite? Professor Claxon let that question hang in the air as the display shifted from furry mammals to something far more alien to most species. The screen now showed glass enclosures containing elongated, silent creatures with unblinking eyes and flickering tongues. Snakes, he explained. Specifically, the venomous varieties that humans choose to keep in their homes. He zoomed in on footage of a human carefully lifting a particularly striking specimen from its enclosure. The creature's scales shimmered with geometric patterns that screamed warning in every known biological language. This particular species, Claxon noted, carries venom potent enough to drop a full-grown Groxian bull in under 30 seconds. Yet here was a human handling it bare-handed. Supporting its weight with what appeared to be casual familiarity. They call this bonding time. The phrase appeared on screen alongside the footage, highlighting the absurdity. A casual intimacy with what any rational species would classify as a mobile death rope. The human in the video was smiling, talking softly to the snake as it coiled around their arm. One student's respiratory vents audibly constricted at the sight. The risk variables multiplied with every second of footage. A misplaced hand during feeding, a faulty seal on the enclosure, a moment of miscommunication between species that don't even share basic facial expressions. The margin for error was measured in millimeters and milliseconds. A single defensive strike could deliver neurotoxins that would shut down entire bodily systems before medical help could possibly arrive. Yet humans pursue this relationship actively. They seek out these animals, pay significant credits for particularly rare specimens, and devote entire rooms in their dwellings to maintaining the precise environmental conditions these creatures require. They do it for the thrill, for the aesthetic appreciation, for the connection with something fundamentally wild and dangerous. It's a complete defiance of every survival instinct every other species possesses. Most civilizations develop fear responses to creatures with that combination of stealth, silence, and lethal capability. Humans seem to develop curiosity instead. The classroom remained silent except for the faint hum of the display. Tentacles remained still. Eye stalks didn't wander. This wasn't viewed as eccentric hobbyism anymore. This was audacity on a biological level. The resolution came in the form of a statistical overlay Claxon provided. Despite the obvious dangers, the number of humans actually killed by their pet snakes remained remarkably low. They'd developed handling protocols, safety equipment, and what appeared to be an almost intuitive understanding of predator body language. They normalized the risk, integrated it into their daily routines alongside more conventional pet care activities like cleaning enclosures and monitoring temperatures. Humans willingly handle venomous snakes, viewing the inherent danger as just another aspect of pet ownership, rather than a reason to avoid it entirely. The cognitive leap was staggering. Where other species see a lethal threat, humans see a potential companion with specific housing requirements. Meanwhile, the examples get even more bizarre. Of course, some humans prefer their pets to have more legs, a lot more. Professor Claxon let the image of a massive tarantula fill the screen, its hairy body and multiple eyes triggering instinctive recoils throughout the lecture hall. He watched as students shifted back in their seats, tentacles curling defensively. The setup was deliberately discomforting, showcasing creatures that appeared in the nightmares of most species across the known galaxy. To most civilized beings, these are living horrors. Multiple jointed legs moving with unsettling coordination, fangs that inject digestive enzymes, bodies covered in urticating hairs that can cause severe irritation to skin and respiratory systems. Their venom isn't just for killing, it liquefies internal organs, turning prey into easily consumable soup. Everything about their design screams predator, from their silent movement to their ability to remain perfectly still for hours waiting for something to wander into striking distance. Humans look at these biological marvels of predation and call them cute. They build elaborate terrariums with careful humidity controls, special substrates and decorative elements to make these hunters feel at home. They document their pets' molting processes with the fascination of scientists watching a miracle unfold, carefully preserving the shed exoskeletons like treasures. They spend hours watching the delicate construction of webs, admiring the engineering precision of structures designed specifically to trap living creatures. It's like keeping a miniature monster in a box on your desk and finding it relaxing. The cognitive disconnect between the creature's natural function and the human response to it was staggering. Where evolution had created the perfect ambush predator, humans saw a fascinating pet. Where instinct said flee, human curiosity said observe. The fear response that served most species so well had been completely replaced by fascination in the human psyche. Professor Claxon showed footage of humans handling these creatures with bare hands, allowing them to crawl across arms and shoulders. He highlighted the trust involved in such interactions, the understanding that while the spider could deliver a painful bite, it generally wouldn't. The humans seemed to take pride in this delicate dance with danger, this establishment of mutual tolerance between species that should by all rights be natural enemies. What does it say about a species that finds beauty in a creature designed to be a nightmare? The question hung in the air as the display showed close-ups of iridescent fangs and delicate spinnerets, producing silk stronger than steel by weight. The students remained silent, their own biological programming conflicting with the evidence before them. Their instincts told them to recoil, to maintain distance, to see threat. The humans in the footage saw pattern, color, behavior worth studying and appreciating. The resolution came through the sheer normalization of it all. Claxon showed human children being taught how to handle tarantulas gently, how to read their body language, how to care for them as pets rather than fear them as monsters. The transformation from object of terror to classroom demonstration animal was complete. Humans kept spiders as pets, creatures other species instinctively feared, and they genuinely saw them as beautiful. The cultural reprogramming was so thorough that many humans actually developed affection for these eight-legged predators. But the scale of danger is about to increase dramatically as we move from creatures that could cause painful bites to animals that could actually kill humans with ease. The professor's tentacles twitched in anticipation as he prepared the next visual presentation, aware that the class was about to witness something that would challenge their understanding of risk assessment entirely. So let's talk about pets that can fly and whose talons exert over 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. Professor Claxon switched the display to show something that made several students instinctively look upward toward the lecture hall's ceiling. The setup was falconry, he explained, an ancient human practice where they keep birds of prey as working partners rather than conventional pets. The footage showed humans with thick leather gloves, various raptors perched on their arms like living sculptures of feather and muscle. These weren't companion animals in the traditional sense. Eagles with wingspans wider than a human is tall, hawks that could spot movement from kilometers away, falcons that could dive at speeds that would rupture most species' circulatory systems. The tension built as Claxon focused on the biological realities. These birds are precision hunters evolved to snatch prey from the ground while moving at high velocity. Their vision is so acute they can see the thermal signature of a small mammal hiding under vegetation. Their talons aren't designed for gentle perching. They're killing tools, curved and sharp enough to puncture vital organs and grip with crushing force. Yet humans train these creatures, spending countless hours building relationships based on mutual respect rather than domination. They learn the bird's body language, their hunting preferences, their individual personalities. The bond is so strong that these predators return to their human partners after hunting flights, choosing to come back to the glove rather than flying free. It's a partnership built on trust, but the kind of trust that could end in severe injury in a heartbeat if either party miscalculates. The humans in the footage showed no fear. They stood with these lethal birds on their arms, smiling as they launched them into flight, watching with obvious pride as their partners demonstrated natural abilities that had been honed over millions of years of evolution. They didn't see dangerous animals, they saw fellow hunters, partners in a dance that predated human civilization itself. The risk of those talons accidentally gripping too hard, of that powerful beak deciding to test whether human flesh tasted like prey, seemed not to occur to them at all. This isn't pet keeping in any conventional sense. It's a display of mastery over wild, lethal forces that most species would consider untamable. Humans haven't domesticated these birds. They've formed working relationships with creatures that remain fundamentally wild. The birds could leave at any time, could choose not to return, could decide their human partner was just another potential meal. Yet they come back, flight after flight, hunt after hunt, forming bonds that transcend the predator-prey dynamic that should naturally exist between species. The resolution became clear as Claxon showed the intricate communication between human and bird. Hand signals, vocal commands, subtle shifts in body position, all forming a language that allowed two completely different species to coordinate hunting strategies. The human would flush prey from hiding, the bird would execute the capture, and they would share the results. It was teamwork with a creature that could effortlessly sever fingers or damage eyesight with a casual swipe of its talons. Humans form these working partnerships with birds of prey, creatures that could easily maim or kill them, and they treat the relationship as both practical partnership and profound spiritual connection. They don't see the danger as a reason to avoid the relationship. They see it as part of what makes the bond meaningful. The risk isn't eliminated. It's managed through knowledge, respect, and accumulated experience passed down through generations. Which brings us to the question of what this confidence really means. If humans can form cooperative hunting relationships with animals that evolution designed specifically to kill, what does that say about their own position in the natural order? The classroom was silent except for the faint sound of the display showing a golden eagle returning to its human's arm. Those deadly talons gently gripping the reinforced leather, the human's face showing pure admiration rather than apprehension. The shift in perspective was almost audible as students began to understand they weren't just studying human pet preferences. They were witnessing something far more significant about human nature itself. You know, some humans aren't satisfied with just one type of predator. They collect them. Professor Claxon led the display cycle through increasingly alarming images as he cataloged what humans considered reasonable pet choices. The lecture moved from household companions to what could only be described as private menageries of creatures that belonged in maximum security containment facilities, not residential dwellings. The setup began with big cats in what humans called sanctuaries, tigers pacing behind fences that looked alarmingly flimsy, lions being fed by hand through chain-link barriers, leopards rubbing against humans like oversized house cats. Then came the aquatic examples. Crocodilians floating in backyard ponds, their eyes and nostrils just breaking the surface as humans walked casually along the water's edge. The tension built steadily as Claxon showed the most extreme footage. A human swimming alongside a great white shark. No cage, no protection. Just a creature synonymous with mindless. Predation gliding peacefully beside them. He mentioned documented cases of emotional support. Alligators and the incident where authorities found a fully grown specimen living in an apartment in a dense urban center. The human occupant claimed it was well-behaved, enjoyed television, and only became aggressive during feeding time. Danger wasn't an anomaly in these relationships. It was a feature, an accepted part of daily life. These humans didn't see apex predators. They saw misunderstood companions that needed proper handling and respect. It's a panoply of lethal animals, all somehow reduced to curiosities, living trophies that demonstrated human mastery over nature itself. Tigers that could shred a human in seconds. Bears that could crush skulls with single swipes. Venomous snakes that could deliver neurotoxins. All became subjects for human fascination and collection. The classroom had gone completely silent now. The earlier murmurs of disbelief had vanished, replaced by a dawning unease that settled over the students like a heavy blanket. What kind of species treats the galaxy's most efficient killers as a hobby? The question hung in the air unanswered, as the display showed more examples. Humans hand-feeding hippopotamuses, responsible for more sentient deaths annually than most large predators, petting full-grown wolves, maintaining private collections of venomous arachnids and insects. The scale of the phenomenon was staggering, not isolated incidents of eccentric behavior, but an entire subculture of humans who actively sought out dangerous animals as companions. The resolution came not through explanation, but through sheer accumulation of evidence. Claxon showed statistics on private ownership permits, sanctuary visitor numbers, online communities dedicated to what humans called exotic pet keeping. The numbers were significant, the communities active and growing. Humans maintained a vast array of lethal animals, from big cats to sharks, and they'd normalize this extreme danger to the point where it became just another aspect of their complex relationship with the animal kingdom. But the statistics behind this behavior, the actual numbers of humans injured or killed by these dangerous pets, would become the most revealing part of the entire lecture. The display shifted from shocking imagery to cold, hard data, and the class leaned forward as one, their earlier discomfort transforming into something closer to academic curiosity mixed with genuine alarm. The real question wasn't why humans did this, but how they managed to survive it. I mean, the real question isn't why they do it, but how they get away with it. Professor Claxon let the data streams flow across the main display, stripping away the dramatic footage and leaving only cold, hard numbers. The setup was simple comparative analysis, interspecies mortality rates across known space, filtered by predator classification and circumstance. He wanted the class to see what he'd begun to suspect, that humanity's relationship with dangerous animals wasn't just unusual, it was statistically impossible. He started with the baseline numbers. Crocodilians across various worlds caused approximately 1,000 sentient deaths annually, when accounting for all documented species and habitats. Sharks, despite their fearsome reputation, accounted for about 10. Large felids, lions, tigers, and their various planetary equivalents, maybe 250 when you included zoo incidents and territorial encounters. The numbers appeared reasonable, aligned with expected predator-prey dynamics throughout the galaxy. Then he showed the human data. The number of humans killed annually by the exact same categories of animals they actively kept as pets or in private collections. The graph barely registered. Statistical noise. A rounding error in humanity's overall mortality rates that included things like vehicular accidents and aging. The display highlighted the comparison. Predators that represented significant threats to other species became near-zero concerns for humans. The silence in the lecture hall became absolute. Not the comfortable silence of students taking notes, but the heavy-weighted silence of cognitive recalibration. The implication hung in the air, cold and undeniable. Humans weren't just surviving these relationships through luck or careful management. They were thriving within them. They were winning what every other species considered an unwinnable biological contest. The risk calculus was completely inverted for them. Where other civilizations saw existential threats, humans saw manageable variables. Predation wasn't something to be eliminated or feared. It was something to be understood, controlled, and ultimately integrated into their daily lives. The animals that haunted other species' evolutionary memories became humanity's companions, curiosities, and in some cases, working partners. Humans suffer almost no fatalities from the dangerous animals they keep. The phrase appeared on screen in stark, simple text, underscored by the statistical evidence. It wasn't that accidents never happened. There were isolated incidents, certainly, but the numbers were so low they barely registered against background mortality rates. A human was more likely to die from falling out of bed than from being killed by their pet tiger. More likely to perish from an allergic reaction than from their collection of venomous snakes. That was the moment the class's perspective truly began to shift. You could see it in the way tentacles uncurled from defensive positions, in how eye stalks focused with new intensity. This wasn't about human eccentricity or recklessness anymore. This was about capability. About a species that had somehow rewritten the fundamental rules of interspecies interaction through some combination of knowledge, confidence, and what could only be described as evolutionary dominance. The resolution came not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet, sobering realization. Humanity's pet-keeping habits weren't a quirky cultural artifact. They were a measurable demonstration of biological supremacy. The statistics didn't lie. When humans decided to form relationships with predators, the predators ceased to be meaningfully dangerous. It was as if humanity occupied a different ecological niche entirely, one where they set the terms of engagement with nature itself. Professor Claxon let the numbers speak for themselves for a full minute, watching as students began making connections he'd only recently made himself. The human who swam with sharks wasn't brave or foolish. They were operating from a position of such inherent security that the shark's threat potential became irrelevant. The person keeping a venomous snake collection wasn't tempting fate, they were demonstrating mastery over forces that controlled other species' survival instincts. The statistical mirror had reflected something back at the class that went far beyond pet preferences. It showed a species that didn't just avoid being prey, it had redefined the entire predator-prey relationship in its favor. And that realization carried implications that would soon extend beyond animal husbandry into much broader galactic considerations. The numbers on the screen weren't just data points. They were the foundation for reevaluating everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity's place in the natural order. So what does it all mean? Are they just lucky? Or is it something else? Professor Claxon watched his students begin to connect the dots, their initial confusion giving way to something more analytical. The setup came not from him but from the classroom itself as Vex and Zeph leaned across their desks, their species equivalent of fur standing slightly on end. The pivotal question emerged not as accusation but as realization. What kind of predator is so confident it invites other predators into its home? It's not a sign of madness, but of supreme dominance. The murmurs in the classroom shifted tone as students began reframing everything they'd seen. That cat on the couch wasn't just a pet, it was a display of power. The dog guarding the child wasn't just protection, it was a statement about who controlled the food chain. The snakes, the spiders, the birds of prey, all living evidence that humanity occupied a position so secure they could afford to befriend what every other species must instinctively flee. Keeping these animals functions as a statement, a living trophy case, a constant reminder to the rest of the galaxy about where humanity stands in the natural order. That casual intimacy with danger, that normalization of risk, it all points to a species that doesn't just avoid being prey, but has rewritten the rules of predation itself. The message is subtle but unmistakable. We are so secure in our position that we can afford to cohabit with what you must fear. The human-pet relationship transforms from affection to strategy under this new light. What appears to be companionship reveals itself as a form of diplomacy, a demonstration of soft power that operates beneath conscious awareness. That cozy image of a cat on a couch becomes a subtly threatening symbol of control when you realize the human could be sleeping with a creature that kills for sport and chooses not to. The dog that licks a child's face retains the evolutionary programming to break bones with its jaws yet chooses loyalty instead. This reframing explains the statistical anomaly perfectly. Humans don't survive these relationships through luck. They thrive in them because they've established dominance so complete that the predators have become participants in the demonstration. The risk calculus isn't inverted by accident. It's inverted because humanity occupies a different ecological niche entirely, one where they set the terms of engagement with nature itself. The resolution crystallized as Claxon watched his students' expressions change. The keeping of predators isn't eccentric behavior. It's a calculated display of human evolutionary leverage. Every purring cat, every loyal dog, every venomous snake in a terrarium serves as living proof that humanity doesn't just compete in the food chain, they oversee it. The domestic space becomes a miniature demonstration ground for galactic dominance, each predator-pet relationship a microcosm of humanity's position relative to other species. But the theory is about to be tested by a very real, very current example that would make the abstract suddenly, uncomfortably concrete. Professor Claxon's communication device chimed softly on the podium, drawing every eye in the room. The timing was almost too perfect, as if the universe itself had decided to provide a case study just as the class reached its theoretical conclusion. The students leaned forward, their earlier academic detachment replaced by keen anticipation, unaware that reality was about to demonstrate the lecture's central thesis in the most dramatic way possible. Of course, just as the theory crystallizes, reality provides its own case study. Professor Claxon's communication device chimed softly on the podium, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent lecture hall. Every eye fixed on the small screen as he glanced down, his tentacles going completely still. The setup was almost too perfect, as if the universe had decided to deliver a live demonstration right on schedule. The message was from Dr. Maya Patel, the human exchange student who should have been in class 20 minutes ago. Claxon read it aloud, his voice flat, each word landing like a stone in water. She was running late, she explained. The reason? She'd stopped to help what she thought was a lost puppy wandering near the quad. It looked so small and alone, she wrote. She couldn't just leave it there. It wasn't a puppy. The class collectively leaned forward as Claxon identified the creature from her description. A juvenile Andromedan shadow wolf. The name alone made several students flinch. These creatures were known for their ferocity, their near invisibility in low light, and their completely unpredictable nature. Most species gave them a wide berth. Encounter protocols involved containment fields and armed response teams, not stopping to offer assistance. "Don't worry, though," her message continued. "They're best friends now." The tension in the room spiked. She'd somehow befriended it. In the span of a 20-minute walk to class, a human had turned a creature classified as a high-level threat into a companion. "His name is Mr. Snuggles," she'd added, as if this were the most normal detail in the world. "He follows her everywhere," the message explained. The professor's voice remained carefully neutral, but you could see the muscles in his tentacles tighten. The human had not only made contact with a lethal alien predator, but had also allowed it to imprint on her, to form an attachment. She ended her message with a practical question, the kind any student might ask about housing policy. "Do the dorms allow pets?" The question hung in the air, absurd and terrifying in equal measure. She wasn't asking about a fish tank or a small mammal. She was inquiring about bringing a juvenile shadow wolf, a creature with instincts geared toward ambush predation and territorial defense, into a shared living space filled with unsuspecting alien students. As a final, breathtaking aside, she noted that Mr. Snuggles gets separation anxiety. The implication was clear. Leaving him alone was not an option. The professor finished reading and looked out at his class. No one moved. No one breathed. The entire abstract discussion about human dominance, the statistical analyses, the theories about displays of power, it all collapsed into this single, undeniable data point. A human student had casually befriended a deadly alien predator and was now treating its housing situation as a minor administrative issue. The resolution was both hilarious and horrifying. This wasn't a historical example or a cultural oddity from a data file. This was happening right now on their campus with a colleague they all knew. The terrifying, adorable reality of it grounded every theoretical point Claxon had made. Humanity's relationship with predators wasn't confined to their homeworld. It was a portable skill set, an approach to the universe they carried with them. This single anecdote demonstrated everything. The confidence, the lack of fear, the immediate reframing of a threat as a potential friend. The human hadn't seen a dangerous animal. She'd seen a lonely creature that needed help. Her instinct wasn't to run or call security. It was to name it Mr. Snuggles and worry about its emotional well-being. The galaxy's most efficient predators weren't just potential pets on Earth. They were potential pets anywhere humans happened to be. The message changed the energy in the room from academic curiosity to something closer to sober reassessment. This was no longer about understanding human eccentricity. It was about recognizing a fundamental truth of human nature that had direct, immediate implications for everyone else. If a human student could befriend a shadow wolf during her walk to class, what did that mean for interspecies diplomacy, for security protocols, for the entire galactic power structure? Professor Claxon set his device down slowly, his gaze sweeping across the silent, stunned faces of his students. The theoretical had just become practical, the abstract had become personal, and the lecture's subject was no longer a distant species but a colleague who was probably currently scratching a shadow wolf behind the ears and wondering if the dormitory had any pet-friendly rooms available. The class held its breath, waiting for the professor to say something to provide some framework for understanding what they had just witnessed. The pause stretched, heavy with unspoken questions about what this meant for all of them. "You know, in diplomacy you have files, threat assessments, protocols." Professor Claxon looked out at his silent class, their usual academic curiosity replaced by something closer to sober realization. The setup was shifting from theoretical discussion to practical application, from animal behavior to interstellar policy. He watched his students processing the implications of what they'd seen. Their various biological indicators showing elevated stress responses across species. He admitted that every species assessment follows standard protocols. Observable behavior gets documented. Military capabilities get measured and cataloged. Technological advancement gets ranked on standardized scales. These form the basis for interspecies relations, for determining threat levels, for deciding who gets taken seriously in galactic councils and who gets handled with containment protocols. It's a system that's worked reasonably well for centuries across multiple civilizations. Humanity's file, he realized aloud, is likely completely wrong. The tension in the room tightened as he explained. Their assessment probably focuses on the obvious metrics: ship tonnage, weapon yields, energy signatures, population numbers. It quantifies what can be easily measured and compared against known benchmarks. These are the traditional markers of power that every civilization understands. It misses the most important data point entirely. Their relationship with the natural world, with predation itself, tells a different story than their technology trees or military deployments. While other species develop fear responses to dangerous animals, humans develop curiosity. Where others see threats, humans see potential companions. This isn't just a cultural oddity. It's a fundamental rewrite of biological programming. A species that domesticates apex predators is not a species you can easily intimidate or threaten. The statement landed heavily in the quiet classroom. If humans can form bonds with creatures evolution designed specifically to kill, how effective would conventional threats against them actually be? Their psychological framework operates on different principles. Their risk assessment follows different calculations. Their casual daily life becomes a demonstration of a fearlessness that is, frankly, terrifying. Professor Claxon gestured toward the now blank display where hours of footage had played. Sleeping with predators, handling venomous snakes, forming partnerships with birds that could blind them with a casual swipe. These weren't extreme sports or daredevil stunts. These were normalized behaviors integrated into ordinary domestic situations. I think, he said slowly, we need to seriously reconsider humanity's threat level in our diplomatic files. The words hung in the air, their implications spreading through the room. This wasn't about upgrading their classification or adding warning labels. This was about fundamental reassessment of what humanity represented in the galactic order. Their pet-keeping habits weren't a sidebar to their profile. They were central to understanding their psychology and capabilities. The resolution became clear as students began accessing their own datapads, pulling up standard galactic threat assessment templates. The categories suddenly looked inadequate, the metrics insufficient. How do you quantify a species that treats lethal predators as companions? Where in the standardized forms do you record that they befriend creatures other civilizations consider nightmares? The existing framework had no boxes for these behaviors, no scales for this kind of psychological profile. Humanity's pet-keeping habits necessitate a major reevaluation of their galactic threat level. The mini payoff wasn't in the conclusion, but in the dawning understanding on the students' faces. They weren't just studying human-animal husbandry. They were witnessing the failure of their own assessment systems. The tools they'd been taught to use for evaluating other species contained blind spots large enough to miss what made humanity truly distinctive. The implications extended beyond diplomatic paperwork. Trade negotiations, security arrangements, first contact protocols, all would need reconsideration if the basic understanding of human nature was flawed. A species that doesn't respond to threats in predictable ways requires different approaches to interaction. Their seemingly illogical behavior with dangerous animals suggested they might approach interstellar relations with similarly unconventional thinking. Which brings us to the final, unsettling question. Professor Claxon let the silence stretch, watching his students grapple with the scale of recalibration required. If everything they thought they knew about assessing other species was potentially incomplete, where did that leave them? The human exchange student's message about Mr. Snuggles wasn't just an amusing anecdote. It was evidence that their entire framework for understanding intelligence and capability might need rebuilding from the ground up. The classroom remained still, the usual rustling of materials and shifting of postures completely absent. Every student was either staring at their datapad or looking toward the professor, their expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. The theoretical had become practical, the academic had become personal, and the safety of standardized assessment protocols had been replaced by the uncomfortable realization that some species defy easy categorization. The threat level discussion wasn't about adding more warning labels or increasing security precautions. It was about recognizing that humanity's relationship with danger wasn't a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be understood. Their comfort with predators suggested a confidence that went beyond military capability or technological advantage. It spoke to a fundamental positioning in the natural order that other species simply didn't share. The files would need rewriting, the protocols would need updating, but more importantly, the perspective would need shifting. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring civilization to be assessed and categorized. They were something different, something that challenged the very foundations of how interspecies relations had been conducted for millennia. The pet keeping was merely the most visible symptom of a much deeper psychological and evolutionary difference. As the professor prepared to move to the final segment of the lecture, he watched his students still processing this revelation. Their entire education had prepared them to analyze other species using established metrics and approved frameworks. Now they faced the disconcerting possibility that those tools were inadequate for understanding the most significant newcomers to the galactic stage. The comfortable certainty of standardized assessment had been replaced by the unsettling awareness that some truths lie outside the boxes on the forms. So if humans are the apex species that treats other apex species as pets, what does that leave for everyone else? Professor Claxon let that question settle over the room like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. The lecture's focus had finally shifted from human oddities to galactic realities, from studying other species to considering one's own place in this newly understood hierarchy. The setup was no longer academic. It was existential. The students grasped the inverted framework almost immediately. Their own species' files and classifications suddenly felt inadequate. Their carefully constructed understanding of galactic relations revealed as potentially naive. If humanity occupied the top position in this revised natural order, the position every civilization had assumed they themselves held, what did that make everyone else? The traditional predator-prey dynamic they'd taken as universal suddenly seemed like a local phenomenon that humanity had transcended. Are we potential pets? The question emerged not from the professor but from a student in the third row, their vocalizer trembling slightly. Companions? Threats to be managed? Subjects for some kind of cosmic menagerie? The alternatives hung in the air, each more unsettling than the last. The human tendency to pack bond with anything took on a new, ominous dimension when considered from this angle. What they'd observed as charming eccentricity now appeared as something far more consequential. Their friendliness might not just be friendliness. It might be a form of collection. The thought moved through the classroom like an electrical current. All those diplomatic overtures, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, were they being interpreted through entirely different frameworks by humans? While other species saw mutually beneficial relationships, humans might see something closer to adoption or domestication. The potential for fundamental misinterpretation became terrifyingly clear. Every established protocol for interspecies relations demanded reconsideration. The entire framework needed rebuilding from the ground up, if the basic assumptions about human psychology were this flawed. Standard diplomatic approaches assumed shared values and mutual respect between equals, but if humanity viewed other species through the lens of their predator-pet relationships, every interaction carried different subtext. A friendly gesture might be read as affection for a potentially useful companion rather than respect for a peer. The resolution arrived not as a conclusion but as a collective realization that spread through the room. Humanity's behavior with predators forced every other species to reconsider their own place in the galactic order. The comfortable certainty of being independent civilizations navigating a complex interstellar landscape gave way to the uncomfortable possibility that humans might perceive them differently. Their self-image as equals in a diverse galactic community faced potential revision. The professor watched his students process this shift. You could see the recalibration happening in real time across various physiologies. Tentacles that usually moved with academic curiosity now hung still. Scales that normally shifted with engagement now remained fixed in neutral tones. Eye stalks that typically scanned information displays now focused inward. The initial amusement at human eccentricity had transformed into sober assessment of what that eccentricity implied about everyone else. The existing galactic files on humanity were clearly incomplete, focusing on measurable factors like technology and military capability, while missing the psychological foundation that made humans fundamentally different. A species that domesticates apex predators isn't just technologically advanced. They're operating from a different evolutionary position entirely. Their comfort with danger, their normalization of risk, their rewriting of predator-prey relationships, these weren't cultural quirks, but evidence of a different relationship with nature itself. This realization extended beyond diplomatic considerations to basic security protocols. Standard threat assessment models assumed that all species responded to danger in fundamentally similar ways, but humans demonstrated a risk calculus that defied conventional understanding. Their statistical immunity to predator-related fatalities suggested they approached danger from a position of inherent security rather than vulnerability. This changed how their military strategies, negotiation tactics, and even everyday behaviors might be interpreted. The human concept of pet keeping transformed from curious hobby to potential paradigm for interspecies relations. What appeared to be affection might actually represent a complex form of dominance display. The cozy image of humans with their animal companions became a subtly threatening symbol when considered from this new perspective. Their willingness to form bonds with lethal creatures suggested a confidence that went beyond simple fearlessness into something more profound. The class ended with the professor's traditional dismissal, but nobody moved. The students remained in their seats, their usual post-lecture chatter completely absent. The weight of their collective realization seemed to physically hold them in place. They weren't just thinking about human behavior anymore. They were contemplating their own species' position relative to this new understanding. The comfortable certainties of galactic relations had been replaced by unsettling questions about where everyone else fit in humanity's unique worldview. The initial intent of the lecture, to examine human peculiarity, had inadvertently led to a much larger conversation about power, perception, and position in the galactic order. What began as an academic exercise in xenobiology had become a catalyst for reevaluating fundamental assumptions about interspecies dynamics. The students sat motionless, each processing how this new perspective might change everything from diplomatic protocols to personal interactions with their human colleagues. Professor Claxon watched them, his own tentacles remaining still. He recognized this moment of collective paralysis, this silent absorption of paradigm-shifting information. The classroom had become a microcosm of the larger galactic community, facing the same unsettling realization. Humanity's relationship with predators wasn't just a curious Earth custom. It was a lens through which their entire approach to the universe might be filtered. And that lens suddenly made everyone else question their own reflection. So that's the real takeaway. Not that humans are eccentric, but that they're dominant. What seems like a quirky love for pets is actually a profound statement of control. They've turned predation into a hobby, danger into decor. So the next time you see a human walking their dog, remember, you're not just looking at a pet owner. You're looking at a curator of living weapons, a master of the food chain. It's not affection. It's display. It makes you think, doesn't it? About who's really in charge out here.